America's heartland is the nation's core when it comes to everything from farming and ranching to community and common sense. To understand why, we reached out to Nebraska U.S. Senator Deb Fischer. She's known for working across the aisle and around the clock to secure everything from agriculture and road safety to America's defense from cyber attack. And the way she does it reminds all of us what public service should really look like and feel like. From Ballard Studios in Washington, D.C., a special episode of 13th and Park.
The hard things that are necessary, we either do it or we'll pay the price down the road.
That often is missing in politics.
We have to solve everything.
It's a nightmare.
You and I can differ, but that doesn't mean you and I cannot be friends.
I have faith in the American people.
Those are the facts.
The Illuminati, right there. Aliens could have invaded and nothing would surprise me at this point.
We went from North Korea to M&M. That's a lot, man.
What's in this tea?
Well, Senator, it's great to have you here in studio. I'm always a little daunted when people like you come from the big hill, Capitol Hill, into our studio. I know you've got so many interesting things you're working on right now. But before we get to that, let's go back for a second. You have a hell of a story. 4 decades of working on a cattle ranch in Valentine, Nebraska. Population 2,633, I think I saw in the last census. You're kind of out there, really in the heartland. And at some point, you decided to run for local office, and you've set your sights first on a local school board. How did coming from Valentine and working on a cattle ranch and serving on a local school board somehow propel you to what you are now?
I knew in 7th grade that I wanted to be involved in public policy making, involved in politics. I guess I was kind of nerdy because I read 3 papers every day, sit around the kitchen table, talk issues, watching Walter Cronkite.
Walter Cronkite.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, back in the day, growing up, my early years, Vietnam War was going on, just seeing all that on the news. And went to University of Nebraska and fell in love with a cattle rancher. I grew up in Lincoln, met my husband at the university, and raised 3 sons on a cattle ranch. And some people say in the middle of nowhere. You said middle of the heartland, but some people say middle of nowhere. I like to say we're the center of the cosmos. Very sparsely populated area in the Nebraska Sandhills. And people came to me early on. I was pretty newly married, and just 2 of our 3 sons were born at the time. And they asked me if I wanted to be on our little local country school board. And I said, yeah, that would be good. My parents were great examples of volunteering and being active in our activities growing up. And then I ran for a larger school board later on, so served about 20 years there. And then ran for the Nebraska legislature and served 8 years there and had the opportunity to run for the Senate. And here I am.
Well, back in the days in the Nebraska legislature, which is unicameral, so it's one house, you got a reputation. I think one of the monikers I picked up was they used to call you, some did, the general, right? Because there was kind of an admiration for the way you kind of worked the process.
Yeah, in Nebraska, we have a nonpartisan legislature. We don't identify by parties, even though everybody knows what party you're in. So it's probably, fair that I had that name, the general, and I think it was just being able to show that you worked hard, you knew your issues, you had those relationships.
There are also descriptions of you that you had what was called a barbed wire toughness. So yes, you could work well with everybody, but they also knew that you were bringing it.
Well, I think I'm charming. Come on, give me a break here. I was also known as the Velvet Hammer.
The Velvet Hammer.
One of my colleagues called me the Velvet Hammer because you've got to round people up.
Let's go into the 2012 election. So there you are. You're running against the Attorney General in the primary, John Brennan. I think the early expectation was he probably would win, or he'd be one of the 2 that would be the favorites. And you came right up the center on the supposed 2 favorites to win that primary nomination to take on the former governor, Bob Kerrey, and you won that going away. What do you remember from that campaign that maybe you still bring with you every day you're doing things here in D.C.?
That you have to work hard.
Yeah.
John Bruning's a good friend. Don Stenberg, the state treasurer at the time, good people. They had statewide recognition. And I think what happened was the majority of people in Washington, for sure, and some in Nebraska discounted my connections around the state.
Right.
My dad was in the Department of Roads for his entire career as a civil engineer. He closed out that career as the state director under Kayor and Ben Nelson before he retired. So my dad had a wonderful reputation around the state. My work throughout the years, whether it was on the school board and those education connections or with ag, being a cattle rancher, all the ag connections. Also, I was involved in different finance things. So I had friends all over the state. I had a network all over the state, which is really important to win statewide elections, and especially in the 3rd district where everybody knows you. From my sorority sisters at the university to other school board members to fellow ranchers. You know, that's a wonderful network to have, and it paid off.
So you, in that campaign, said you were going to bring Nebraska to D.C. So have you done that? And how have you tried to do that to kind of bring the Heartland's values and sense of hard work and common sense into play?
It's important to do that. And when I talk about bringing Nebraska to Washington, I'm talking about bringing those values. That includes hard work. It includes keeping your word. It includes being honest with people. It also includes being straight, being blunt.
Yeah.
I believe in straight talk from the Sandhills. You know, that's who we are. And when I first came, I had a lot of people here in Washington say to me, you know, you're very blunt. And I would just smile and say, you know, you don't become a United States Senator if you don't connive a little bit too. You know, you've got to be able to figure out how all this stuff works. But now you hear about they want us to be authentic. I've always been authentic.
Right. That was,
you know, it's who we are. It's who we are. And people in Nebraska knew that. You know, I'm out across the state all the time. I'm back every weekend. I have meetings every weekend in Lincoln and Omaha. And when I get few more days off, I spend it traveling the state.
Well, let's talk about some of the things you're working on. So the Last Acre Act. For agriculture, it's gotten much more high-tech than ever before. And it needs to be to continue to produce for the world the food that we need.
Right.
And so not to have broadband access when you're a farmer is a dramatic impediment to them doing the very thing they're setting out to do, right?
Oh, definitely. You know, and there's all that great technology. And to be able to tap into that new technology with precision agriculture. But if you only give broadband to your residents on a farm, that's not helpful. You've got to be able to access the tractors that are out there that provide you with the tools so you can be a better steward on the land, so that you can be more profitable. The Last Acre Bill, which is going to help the USDA be able to really provide for that connectivity out there. We have precision ag bills that we're going to be getting into the Farm Bill as well. And that's going to help especially smaller ranchers and farmers, younger farmers, be able to access different loan programs so they also can afford the equipment, because it's pretty expensive.
So having broadband that allows you to literally be able to maximize every inch of every acre continues to give America's farmers probably a competitive edge, too, among, you know, the farming community in the world, doesn't it?
Yeah, we feed the world.
Yeah.
You know, we're so very, very fortunate in the United States that we have this strong, great ag economy. We have hardworking farmers and ranchers. In a state like Nebraska, it's the economic engine of the state. We're the beef state. We have all segments of the beef industry, from cow-calf ranches like our family ranch to feedlots, large and small, and 3 of the 4 big packers. And there's a new facility, huge facility in North Platte, Nebraska.
North Platte, sure.
Sustainable beef.
Yeah.
I mean, that is such a wonderful, obviously, facility for that region of the state of Nebraska, but also for Nebraska as a whole. We need to be proud of feeding the world. We need to be proud of providing for our national security by having that food security. And we need to tell our story better.
Let's go from that to a piece of common sense, the She Drives Act, right? Tell me about that.
Yeah, you know, crash test dummies have always been modeled on a male physique. they haven't been updated to be able to account for women's bodies and how women would be impacted by a crash. Yeah, totally. Women die 17% more often than men in crashes. So to be able to have different safety standards out there, like having a female crash test dummy, that's going to save lives. And that's what we're looking to do, to be able to bring attention to this, to get the data out there, and be able to save lives in the future.
Who's against that?
Well, I don't think anybody should be.
It's a bipartisan effort, right?
It
you have
is.
Democratic senators, Murray and Duckworth and others.
Yeah, Senator Duckworth and I are leading it. We have Blackburn on it. And, hopefully we'll be able to get that passed. It's a good bill. It needs to be done.
So let's talk about cybersecurity and the Secure Space Act. What are we most vulnerable to in this country today, and how are those things going to help us kind of secure ourselves better than we have before?
Yeah, we face a lot of threats as a country. I'm on Armed Services Committee. I'm on 6 committees, Armed Services, one of them. We need to help get facts out, I believe, to the American people. We need to declassify some of the information we receive as senators on these threats that we have. When you look at the Safe Space Act, we need to make sure that our adversaries do not have access to our markets. We face enough dangers in space. I chair the subcommittee on strategic forces, and we look at space as a warfighting domain, which it is. It's a place that we need to make sure that we are not just up to date, but ahead of the game against our adversaries there.
Do you think the American people really get how serious a threat these things are? I mean, you hear this all the time because of the committees you're serving on. It's pretty frightening when you think about all the things that could possibly happen we haven't really taken seriously enough.
And I think it's because of the lack of information.
Yeah.
I go through 2 to 3 classified briefings every week. I'm leading the charge on nuclear modernization, both of our weapons and of our platforms. We're fighting to make sure that we can defend this homeland through deterrence with our triad. We also need to defend this homeland through missile defense. That ties into Spectrum, which is tied into my position on Commerce Committee. There would be, I think, just more support for our military, but especially more support for the resources that our military needs to defend our homeland.
When you say resources, Senator, is it more traditional resources or is it kind of 21st century resources?
Well, we have to evolve. Our adversaries certainly are. Just look at how war has changed. Look at the last 3 years in Ukraine. This is something that we have to adjust to, why we still are trying to ramp up our production when it comes to munitions. We have to be able to get a Columbia-class submarine out on schedule. There's a lot to do here. So I feel, again, that we have to declassify some material without putting anyone or any missions in danger by doing that, but also to get the message out and talk about this and not shy away from it. And President Trump has stepped forward and embraced peace through strength, as Reagan did. Mm-hmm. It's different than it was with Ronald Reagan just because we live in different times and there's different platforms out there that we need to adapt to and, again, stay ahead of the bad guys.
Let's go back to infrastructure, which I think is a critical building block of economic strength. Think of all the times that you were in the car with your dad traveling around Nebraska, right? And he served as the head of roads under a number of different governors. So he saw a lot of different kind of flavors, a lot of different approaches. But that must have really impressed you enough for you to go into the Nebraska legislature and do the Build Nebraska Act as kind of a lifelong passion and pursuit that still, I hear, Senator, you're still building roads today from that act.
Yes. People have told me it was probably one of the most important pieces of legislation passed in Nebraska in 30 years because it makes an investment. It makes an investment in the future, and that's what infrastructure is all about. growing up, we'd take road trips or Sunday drives. And what they really were inspection tours. You know, I would tease my mother as we would go through old pictures. My two older brothers and I were looking over a bridge, and my dad's teaching us how to drop a plumb line, you know.
Like all your other friends, they're dropping plumb lines, right?
They probably were at amusement parks, you know. We're doing inspection tours across the state. But I think it just, by osmosis, you know, I understood my dad's feelings on that, and my mother loved it just as much. She was an elementary school teacher, but we would take these family drives or on our way to Colorado and make these stops all along the way. And I think it just instilled in me the knowledge that infrastructure is an investment for the future.
If you were to look back on your life, what do you want to feel that you brought to the table that really makes that a life worth lived?
I would hope people would say, I worked to keep this country safe, and I worked hard for the people of Nebraska.
Senator, it's great to be with you. By the way, I trust you're a Cornhusker fan.
Oh, my goodness,
didn't
yes.
want to, both you and your husband coming from Lincoln, you know, I figured
Well,
that.
we're struggling a little on
little
football now, last 20 years.
I remember Coach Osborne in those days. Oh, my gosh.
Devaney.
Yes, it's incredible.
Yeah, but we're a volleyball school and turning into a softball school and a baseball school, and it's exciting to see, and just the research that goes on at the university and all the innovation that's happening on our campuses.
Senator, again, great to have you on the show and to really feel, again, what it means to say Heartland. Heartland values, Heartland common sense. It isn't just a saying, it's a way of living, it's a way of believing, and I think you personify that as well as anyone I've ever met.
Well, thank you very much. Very kind of you. I enjoyed our conversation. Thanks.